They sold my lake house to pay for my sister's $150,000 wedding, then laughed and called it a wedding present. I just smiled and told them to check their mail. The smiles vanished the moment they saw it. The lake house my grandfather, Jack, had left me was more than property. It was a sanctuary, a promise of my future, and my most cherished possession. At 34, I had poured my heart into building a successful life, only to have the foundation shaken when I discovered my parents had secretly sold it. The funds, I would soon learn, were used to finance my sister Hannah's extravagant wedding, a betrayal so profound it shattered the fragile trust that had always defined our family. My family's structure had long been clear: Hannah, the radiant center of our universe, and me, a distant, self-sufficient satellite. The betrayal of the lake house, however, was a line I never imagined they would cross. Grandpa Jack was the only person who truly saw me. While my parents were constantly preoccupied with Hannah's endless demands and dramatic flair, Grandpa Jack was my quiet confidant. He took me fishing, taught me to mend what was broken, and shared stories of his own life. A self-made carpenter, he had built his rustic lake house on 3 acres of Lake Winnipesaukee waterfront in the 1970s. From age 5 until I left for college, it was my summer home. The 3-bedroom cabin, with its massive stone fireplace and panoramic windows, was a world away from the pressures of daily life. The old dock, stretching 20 feet into the water, was my favorite spot, a place for quiet contemplation with my feet in the cool lake. The boathouse held his old fishing boat, and the canoe he taught me to paddle when I was 7. Every corner held a memory that had shaped my childhood. When Grandpa Jack passed away 6 years ago, everyone assumed the lake house would be sold or divided among the grandchildren. Instead, his will was a testament to his understanding of my spirit. To my granddaughter Audrey, who appreciates the value of hard work and solitude, I leave my lake house and all its contents in the hope that she will find the same peace there that I did. My parents' faces were a mask of shock. My mother quickly replaced her surprise with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How wonderful, Audrey! You always were Jack's favorite," she said, her tone suggesting a victory I had somehow cheated to achieve. My father simply looked disappointed, no doubt calculating the lost income from a potential sale. Hannah, 27 at the time, made no pretense of happiness. "But that property is worth a fortune now. Why would he leave it all to Audrey? I spent just as much time there as she did." This was a blatant lie. Hannah had always grown bored of the lake house after a day or two, craving the social life of the city. The moment was a snapshot of a lifelong pattern. From our earliest days, Hannah was the star, and the rest of us were orbiting planets. She was the pretty, social one who always needed things. I was the responsible, self-sufficient one who was expected to understand when family resources were directed to Hannah. When she wanted expensive ballet lessons, my parents found the money. When I wanted to attend an architecture camp, I was told to save my babysitting earnings. When she crashed her first car, my parents replaced it. When I needed textbooks for college, I worked 2 jobs to buy them. Despite this imbalance, I built a successful career as an architect, founding a respected firm that specialized in sustainable residential design. My parents acknowledged my achievements with mild surprise, as if they had never expected me to succeed without their constant support. Hannah, meanwhile, drifted through a series of short-lived jobs, blaming each one for not appreciating her talents. My parents subsidized her lifestyle, paying her rent and credit card bills, all without question. 3 years ago, Hannah met James, and my parents were overjoyed. He came from a wealthy family, worked at his father's investment firm, and seemed to possess the means to provide the life Hannah felt she deserved. What they chose to overlook was that James shared Hannah's financial irresponsibility. He maintained an extravagant facade with designer clothes and lavish vacations, but his life was built on significant debt. When they announced their engagement, Hannah's dream wedding grew exponentially. The local country club was replaced by an exclusive resort. The guest list ballooned from 100 to 300, and her simple white dress became a custom gown handcrafted in France. My parents' stress became palpable. My father's typical boasts about his business successes became vague, and my mother's phone was suddenly her constant companion at family dinners. I offered to contribute to the wedding, a gesture my father quickly rejected. "That's very generous, Audrey, but unnecessary. We have it under control." The signs were all there. I simply failed to imagine how far they would go to protect the family dynamic that had defined our lives. 6 months before the wedding, Hannah's Instagram feed became a daily showcase of extravagance. A $15,000 photographer, custom invitations, and monogrammed everything. At a Sunday dinner, I mentioned my plan to visit the lake house for maintenance. "Oh, you don't need to bother with that," my mother said, her voice too quick. "Your father hired someone new to look after things." This was a lie. My longtime caretaker, Ted, had made no mention of retirement when we'd last spoken. Around the same time, I noticed several family photos featuring the lake house had been removed from the walls. My mother claimed they were being reframed. Then came the gifts, a diamond bracelet for Hannah, a 3-week honeymoon in Bali, and a brand new BMW. "Where is all this money coming from?" I asked my friend Sophia. "The wedding has morphed into something out of a celebrity magazine." A few days later, I ran into James at a restaurant. "Audrey, just the person I wanted to see," he said, giving me a hug. "I haven't had a chance to thank you properly for your incredibly generous contribution to the wedding." I was stunned. "My contribution?" James, realizing he had misspoken, quickly backtracked, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The final piece of the puzzle came from Dorothy Matthews, my neighbor at the lake. "Audrey, dear, I wanted to check in about the sale," she said on the phone. "Will you still be coming up to visit occasionally?" My heart started pounding. "What sale are you talking about?" Dorothy, horrified, stammered that I should speak to my parents. The next strange incident was my discovery that the lake house landline had been disconnected, and someone had made 3 failed attempts to access my savings account. The evidence was overwhelming, and I knew I had to drive up to the lake house myself. The 3-hour drive from Boston was a blur of frantic thoughts. Perhaps they had rented it out, or borrowed against it. The worst-case scenario felt too awful to consider. As I turned onto the familiar gravel road, I saw fresh tire tracks. The old Whitaker's Rest sign was gone. And then, I saw the moving truck. A middle-aged couple stood in the driveway, a man with a clipboard, a woman pointing towards the boathouse. They were moving things out. "Excuse me, what's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. "This is my house." The couple, who introduced themselves as Robert and Linda Peterson, looked confused. "There must be some mistake," Robert said. "We purchased this property 3 weeks ago. We closed on it last Friday." My legs nearly gave out. "That's impossible. I never sold this house." Robert handed me a folder of documents. "We bought it from Thomas and Elizabeth Whitaker. My parents." I flipped through the papers, my hands shaking, and saw my parents' signatures. Then I saw a forgery of my own. "This is not my signature," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "I never agreed to sell this property." The Petersons were horrified. They were innocent buyers, victims of the same deception. I left in tears, a feeling of utter devastation washing over me as I drove away from the home that was no longer mine. At the county records office, a sympathetic clerk confirmed the sale had been finalized 3 weeks earlier for $375,000, a staggering $175,000 below market value. It had been a cash sale, a rush transaction. As I was leaving, my phone rang. It was Dorothy, who had overheard my parents discussing their plan to sell the house to fund the wedding before I found out. Her statement, which she promised to email, became a key piece of evidence. My next call was to my friend Stephanie, a real estate attorney. "They forged my signature, Stephanie. They sold my house to pay for Hannah's wedding." "Jesus, Audrey, that's not just unethical. That's criminal. Forgery, fraud, theft," she said. We arranged to meet, and in her office, Stephanie confirmed my worst fears. The forged signature was clear fraud, and the sale could be reversed. The question was, what did I want to do? Despite the profound betrayal, I did not want my parents arrested. I wanted justice, and I wanted my property back, but I couldn't bring myself to send them to jail. I decided to wait. Hannah's wedding was 3 weeks away. I knew that if I confronted them now, the focus would be on saving the wedding, and I would be cast as the villain. But if I waited until after, there would be nowhere to hide. Stephanie agreed. We would prepare the legal documents, gather witness statements, and build an airtight case. And then, she said with grudging admiration, the day after the wedding, we deploy it cold. The engagement party at a 5-star hotel was a surreal spectacle of my stolen property. Thousands of white orchids, crystal chandeliers, and a champagne fountain filled the ballroom. Hannah, radiant in a beaded gown that could pass for a wedding dress, gushed about the party as I mechanically catalogued the expenses. I overheard my father assure my mother that the house money covered the essentials, while they planned to put the extras on the equity line. The house money. My house money. Hannah then clinked her glass, calling for everyone's attention. After thanking her parents, she turned to me. And a special thank you to my sister Audrey, she said, her voice thick with emotion, for her incredibly generous wedding gift. We couldn't have done any of this without you, sis. I froze, a fraud in plain sight, as the room applauded me. The evening was a blur of painful encounters. My Aunt Patricia cornered me, offering her condolences about the lake house. Such a wonderful sister you are to make such a sacrifice, she said, revealing the false narrative my parents had constructed, that I had willingly sold the property to help Hannah. The evidence of my stolen inheritance was everywhere, from the customized sculpture to the monogrammed crystal champagne flutes. I finally confronted my parents near the gift table. The lake house sold quickly, I said, my voice neutral. I met the new owners. My mother's smile faltered, and my father quickly tried to change the subject, citing peak property values. I simply smiled and said, "You're right. This is hardly the time or place. We'll have plenty of time to discuss it later." The next morning, Stephanie and I formalized our strategy. She would file for an emergency injunction to halt any further transactions, and we would prepare the documents to report the forgery to the district attorney. We even consulted a criminal attorney, who confirmed my parents could be facing substantial fines and jail time. The thought still made my stomach turn, but I knew I was doing what had to be done. I spent the next week compiling a file of evidence, Dorothy's statement, bank records, proof that the notary's stamp had been forged, and Hannah's social media posts correlating wedding expenses with withdrawals from my parents' account. Stephanie suggested I write a personal letter to my parents. I spent days on it, struggling to articulate the depth of the betrayal. I kept it simple. They had not just committed a crime, they had stolen my connection to Grandpa Jack, my memories, and my future. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, a cruel irony. As a bridesmaid, I performed my duties mechanically, holding Hannah's bouquet and adjusting her gown. Her dress, the flowers, the photography, each element represented another piece of my stolen legacy. During the toasts, my father proudly declared that they had spared no expense for Hannah because she deserved nothing but the best. Later, a slightly tipsy Hannah echoed the sentiment, thanking me publicly for making the biggest sacrifice of all. I finally cracked when my parents cornered me near the dessert table. "We never properly thanked you," my mother slurred, "for understanding about the house. It was the only way to give Hannah the wedding she deserved." A strange calm settled over me. "You should check your mail tomorrow," I said with a slight smile. "Just some information I think you'll find interesting." The next morning, a courier delivered the legal package. At 9:01 a.m., my phone began ringing. I let the calls go to voicemail. Text from my parents quickly followed. "What is this, Audrey? We need to talk." A call from an unknown international number revealed it was Hannah, back early from her honeymoon, furious. "They said you're suing them on the day after my wedding. How could you be so selfish?" she demanded. "They forged my signature and sold my house to pay for your wedding," I replied, my voice unwavering. Did you know? I knew they were using money from the lake house sale, she admitted, her voice now small. But they told me you had agreed to it. And you believed that I would give up Grandpa Jack's inheritance for your one-day celebration? Hannah started to cry. You're ruining everything. We have to come home early. I'm sorry your honeymoon is interrupted, I said, not feeling sorry at all. But this is a situation of Mom and Dad's making, not mine. My family meeting the next day was anything but. I walked in with Stephanie, my attorney. My parents, flanked by Hannah, James, and a couple of relatives, looked shocked. This is Stephanie Miller, my attorney, I said. She goes wherever I go for discussions about this matter. My father attempted to soften the mood. Audrey, honey, we know you're upset. There was a misunderstanding about the lake house. Implicit consent? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You forged my signature on legal documents and sold property that didn't belong to you. Which part of that was a misunderstanding? I opened my laptop and presented our evidence. The forged documents, the bank records, the witness statements, all laid bare. The room was silent. Do you have any idea what you've done? I asked my parents. You stole from me and violated my trust in the most fundamental way possible. For what? So Hannah could have gold flakes on her wedding cake? My father, finally defeated, admitted their mistake. My mother confessed to a lifelong pattern of favoring Hannah, taking my independence for granted. We took your strength for granted instead of nurturing it, my father said. We failed you, Audrey. Their apology felt both genuine and wholly inadequate. The damage was done. The legal aftermath unfolded over the next 6 months. The sale was invalidated, the Petersons were compensated, and my parents repaid me the full value of the property with interest, narrowly avoiding criminal charges in exchange for community service and mandatory counseling. The lake house was mine again, but it felt different, tainted by betrayal. I spent that summer restoring it, physically and spiritually. I replaced the locks, repainted the walls, and installed a security system. Each improvement was an act of reclamation, making the space mine once more. My relationship with my family entered a new, guarded phase. Hannah and I spoke infrequently. During one of our rare calls, she finally asked the question that had clearly been bothering her. Would you have helped with the wedding if they had asked you directly? Would you have sold the lake house? No, I said finally. The lake house was never mine to give away. It was Grandpa Jack's legacy, entrusted to me because he knew I valued it for what it was, not what it could be sold for. My parents and I established a careful distance. We met for brief meals, and our conversations were painful but honest. They confessed that they had always thought I was so capable that I didn't need their support, a heartbreaking admission. Being self-sufficient became a punishment, I told them. My father nodded, accepting the truth. 2 years after the wedding, I invited my parents to the lake house. They walked through the renovated space, noting the changes I had made with visible emotion. Jack would be proud of what you've done here, my father said. He always said you understood the value of this place in a way the rest of us never did. Their visit was not a full reconciliation, but a step toward healing. 3 years after the wedding, I stood on the dock at sunset, watching the light play across the water. The lake house was fully mine again in every sense. I had defended it, reclaimed it, and restored it. Grandpa Jack's legacy lived on, not just in the physical structure, but in the strength he had seen in me long before I recognized it in myself. For years I had allowed my family to take advantage of me, accepting less and telling myself it didn't matter. But in doing so, I had enabled the very dynamic that led to the theft of my inheritance. Standing up for myself was not just about reclaiming the lake house. It was about reclaiming my place in my own story. It was about saying, clearly and finally, that I matter.